back to the third Saturday in October. This has been a wild week. We have a lot to talk about, and we are excited to be your tailgating podcast for the rest of us for the Southeastern Conference. It's been a wild week here. Chris Murphy over there, Bradley Minigan, ready to chat all about it. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. My virtual background this weekend is a hospital room, because a lot of our headlines deal with coronavirus, COVID-19, and just want to say we're not trying to offend anybody. We know people who have been affected by this virus, but sometimes the only way, or one way, to get through a dark and stressful time is with humor. So while we may make light of it during our podcast coming up, know that we take the actual pandemic very seriously. And so we just want to let you know, but we have a lot of fun on this podcast because there are a lot of COVID headlines. There are a lot of games that are just, who would have thought that they would have had that outcome? So we get into all that on today's episode.
Yeah, again, heart goes out to all those that have been affected over the past several months with all of this. And especially, the headlines dominating the Southeastern Conference this week have been COVID-related headlines, with at least 2 games canceled at this point, programs finding COVID-related issues. So if any of those, anybody is affected, heart goes out to you. We want to make sure that the third Saturday in October show is something that is fun and lighthearted and enjoyable. And again, what you would be talking about if you're tailgating with your friends right before the big game. So we don't mean to take any offense, or we don't mean to offend anyone with that. Just go ahead and know that our hearts go out to those people. And we'll keep chugging along here and trying to make the best of a situation that is unlike anything anyone that's listening right now has ever seen.
Absolutely right. And as you said, we just want to have fun, have some conversation like we would at a tailgate. And there are lots of different ways that you can kind of join the third Saturday in October tailgate. One is by finding us on social media at TSIO Pod on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can also subscribe to our channel on YouTube, where you get to see videos of our podcast with cool virtual backgrounds from me and Chris's lovely Glenn Fry-ish, like 1973 Glenn Fry-ish locks. But also, if you go to thirdsaturdayiNoctober.com, there's several things you can do there. You can join our Pick'em League, where you can kind of show us how much you know about picking against the spread. I know nothing about picking against the spread. I think I'm in next to last place or last place. Just because I have a podcast doesn't mean I'm smart. Let me just say that. But also, you can sign up for our virtual tailgate. One of the guys who's been a part of all of our virtual tailgates so far this year, Josh, said to me just the other day, what I miss most about college football this year is tailgating, getting to watch football with other people. And he loves our virtual tailgate because a couple of us get together, just hang out. You can come and go as you please, but we're there. We'll talk football. We'll watch football. We'll talk about all other sorts of stuff. My son makes appearances as well. That is reason enough to join our virtual tailgate over at thirdsaturdayiNoctober.com. Sign up to get an invitation there. So let's just get into the headlines and last week's games, this week's games, or what's left of them as they start to drop like flies.
Yeah, if we even have games,
and of course make our picks and pregame. So Chris, let's get to the show.
Let's do it.
So, Chris, let's talk about the headlines, because there is a lot happening, or there's a lot happening talking about what's not going to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot happening under one heading, which is essentially COVID-19. If in our location where we record every week in Nashville, I read an article that said that Nashville is becoming the hub of sports-related COVID news, with the Tennessee Titans having to miss some games with COVID outbreaks, even our soccer team or our European football, having to miss some games. And now with the SEC, it looks like that this week, the first SEC game postponed because of COVID was Vanderbilt playing Missouri this week. But since that's happened, the rest of the SEC seems to be falling apart, domino by domino.
Right. Well, LSU Florida is postponed. Vanderbilt Missouri is postponed. Nick Saban is postponed. I have a hard time believing that Nick Saban is not going to coach somehow. Whether it's he's in full hazmat suit on the sideline, going all bubble boy on the sideline, going Hugh Freeze in a hospital bed, in a press box by himself.
Right.
He's going to have some sort of a bubble. There's just nobody quite like Saban on the sidelines. And
yeah, you're right. With the news, they're saying that now Steve Sarkisian is now going to be taking over football related responsibilities while Nick is out. And although he has been a head coach before, he has been an assistant coach now. I think this is his second time around being a coach at Alabama. He's been in the NFL, so I know that he's capable of doing it. But for the first time in over a decade, to not have Saban on the sideline is a scary proposition, especially with the week that we have against Georgia looming, where it's almost a pick 'em straight up with those two teams anyway. And now without his presence on the sideline, you got to wonder what Alabama's chances are leading into Saturday's game.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get into our picks. But two things I wonder, because I watched the Nick Saban press conference from his house.
Yeah.
Two questions or two things that I noticed. One, has Nick Saban ever said Sarkisian? He only said Sark last night. And I'm just wondering, can he say a name like that? But second, you and I have shared on this podcast before, maybe just through social media, that we are big Eagles fans. And what I couldn't get past in the press conference last night was Nick Saban's there in his home office. Behind him, he's got a couple trophies, maybe Coach of the Year or something, a miniature national championship trophy. And right behind that, the Eagles album, One of These Nights. And so I just love that Nick Saban is an Eagles fan. Apparently so is my son.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And when you pointed that out, I was so impressed with your keen eye to be able to see that, because, watching it as well, I'm just watching his face, not really paying attention to the stuff in the background. But I think that you pay attention to your background every week when it comes to the show, and put something up that's always fun and entertaining. I'm barely trying to. If you're on YouTube watching this, I've got a couple footballs back here, but other than that, I've got a plant and a wall phrase here. But you are the background king, and so I'm impressed that you were able to see that. But I'm also impressed that Saban, of all the things that he could have put in his background, has an Eagles album. Which can I just say, I think I really do think it's been said many times before. You and I are the Henley Fry of the SEC podcasting world. We just are. We've got the hair, we've got the look. We're big Eagles fans. So I think that Saban was actually shouting out Third Saturday in October show when he did that. So I'm just saying, it may be a hot take, but I'm going to go ahead and say he was essentially winking and nodding and saying, "I see you, Bradley. I see you, Chris."
Hey, well, I will roll with that hot take. So, yeah, I mean, just initial thoughts, or maybe give me an emoji. You can show it to me on your face. You can explain it for those listening on podcast. When you heard this news, what were your thoughts?
Let's see. I'll try to express it in an emoji, which is just the biggest frowny face I can pull off. Like, trying there. If not, the actual tears spurting out of the eyes with the cry face emoji. Because again, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes when it comes to our pick'em segment. But Saturday's game is going to be hard enough with all of our weapons ready to go. Without arguably the biggest weapon that the Alabama Crimson Tide has ever had, save for Paul Bear Bryant almost 40 years ago now, is not going to be there. So cry emoji, stress emoji. I didn't, maybe that explosion emoji too, because of all of this. Like, I would have imagined that the game would have been canceled due to COVID before I would have imagined that Saban wouldn't have been on the sidelines.
Right.
So,
but he may just go around and infect his whole team, just just so he can get it postponed.
Yeah. I was all ready to get on here today and talk about the anger that I had, and I'm going to mention it a bit, but the anger that I had with our defensive play calling and our defensive ability to wrap up and tackle when it comes to the Ole Miss game last week. But the COVID news has definitely taken over. And speaking of Ole Miss right now is still in operation, but there's been several breakouts there as well. So we have 2 games canceled. Another game significantly impacted with Saban not going to be on the sidelines, and Ole Miss with outbreaks themselves, that who knows between now when we're recording and the game's actually playing, what's going to happen. So again, in a year where anything goes and everything has happened, this is just one of those things where I would like to have been more surprised by it than I am. But there was part of me that was just like, it's par for the course in 2020, man.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you mentioned last week's game against Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. There was, one of the highest scoring games we've seen in SEC history.
Yeah.
A whole lot of yards. Lane Kiffin stealing signals, really? And just a down to the wire game between lowly Ole Miss and the Crimson Tide of Alabama. Chris, what the heck happened?
Man, this has been a week of frustration as an Alabama fan, because I was ready to do a solo side episode on Monday or Tuesday calling for our defensive coordinator's head, because of how bad our defense has looked the last couple of years. And I've heard things of just the general turnover that the coaching staff has had over the past several years under Saban, with people going elsewhere, is the culprit. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see a national championship caliber team with all those 4- and 5-star players on both sides of the ball. And offense seems like they're playing lights out every week, but our defense, I don't think that we're the lowest defense as far as production this year in the SEC. But man, it has not been impressive, and it's downright angering as a fan watching the team struggle that much on defense. So who knows what's going to happen? But I was very disappointed. And again, signal stealing, I don't give that much credence. I just think that if Lane Kiffin stole anything, it was our number, because he had it on Saturday night.
Well, I agree. If he stole signs, I think it's because Alabama hasn't changed them since he's been there, which shame on Alabama.
Yeah, true.
But my thought was, okay, Lane Kiffin's job was to come in and go against Nick Saban's defense every day in practice. Yeah. You think he knows Saban's tendencies and weaknesses just in his schemes? I mean, Lane Kiffin is one of the best offensive-minded coaches in college football.
Yeah.
So I think he just saw something and knew how to exploit a Saban defense and did it to perfection, near perfection on Saturday. But I mean, were there just 1 or 2 punts in the entire game, I think?
Yeah, I think that maybe Alabama punted once and Ole Miss punted once or twice, and that I don't know that happened until like the as far as the Ole Miss punts happened until like the fourth quarter or so.
Yeah.
Just because I've heard other people say, and it kind of showed on the field that as much as Ole Miss had a chance to win that game, I think that the hype, the excitement, the pressure that they put on Alabama, I think that in the end it came down to maybe Ole Miss lost that game simply because, not that they didn't outplay Alabama, because it definitely seems like they did, but maybe they just eventually wore themselves out playing at such a high level for such a long time during that game. Props to Ole Miss. I think that Lane Kiffin, again, he dialed up an offensive game plan that was stellar. But as an Alabama fan, it showed a lot of holes that need to be worked out through the rest of the year. So very interesting game. Very interesting game games across the SEC. I had a blast watching the games. Several that I watched alongside our virtual tailgate that we'll talk about a bit later as well. But that was so much fun. But a great day for football and a great day for upsets. SEC looking like they didn't look like the SEC. The lack of defense had some boneheaded plays, especially when it comes to Bo Nix over at Auburn. Just so much happened. Games that you would have never thought would have been a question were upsets and should have been upsets, especially when it comes to Alabama or Auburn and Arkansas as well. What are some of your thoughts on the rest of the games Saturday?
Really surprising with Arkansas almost hanging on to beat Auburn. I was down in Georgia for my son's birthday and watched the Tennessee-Georgia game with my father-in-law, diehard Georgia fan, lifelong Georgia fan. He did not have to watch it in another room. I actually really enjoyed watching it with him. We missed kickoff. We missed Tennessee's first touchdown because we were taking family pictures. When you schedule pictures for 3:00 and kickoffs at 3:30, you're probably not going to make kickoff. But
yeah, that's true.
Here, we're taking pictures, smiling, posing, and my phone starts blowing up. What the heck? Something just happened. And Georgia had snapped it over their quarterback's head. Tennessee recovered for a touchdown, first play of the game. Tennessee was really competitive for the first half and maybe a little into the third quarter. And then 2 fumbles and an interception just kind of wrecked any chance we had to upset Georgia. All those turnovers created by a really strong Georgia defensive line. That's just what's going to happen sometimes. But I did love watching the game with my father-in-law. As I said, we got to break down plays and kind of analyze as we were there. Because it wasn't a blowout game, it was tense. Not between us, but just individually. But really enjoyed watching the game with him, getting his analysis and insight, and then just couldn't hang on at the end. Georgia's defense allowed them to pull away, and I think Tennessee, in some ways, with the turnovers, just kind of got down on themselves and couldn't rebound. That's something that a mature team can do, and Tennessee just couldn't do it on Saturday.
I'm looking at the East now. The last several years, the SEC seems to have been, with the exception of Georgia in the last couple of years, it seems to have run through the West as far as championships, Alabama being over there. And again, this is not necessarily an Alabama fan speaking, just an SEC fan looking at it. But Saturday showed that the West looks lost. It looks like it doesn't have its identity. It looks like it doesn't have any consistency. But the East is looking strong. I've been saying for a while that I think that Tennessee 2021 will be Tennessee's year. I feel like Tennessee can say we're back in 2021. But I think the record is showing that Tennessee is holding strong. And one more slip up from Florida, like they did last week. Tennessee could very well be up in that number 2 spot this season behind Georgia. So, gosh, the East is looking great. The West looks bizarre. We
got Arkansas, who came out of nowhere. Auburn isn't sure who they are. Mississippi State, were they a one and done? Ole Miss, the Lane Train Express, pulling into the station. LSU, who are they? Who dat?
Who knows?
A&M.
A&M, yeah.
I mean, we thought they were going to be down and out, and then they beat Florida. And then Alabama offensively is still the Alabama I'd call 2.0 ever since Lane Kiffin got there and since with their offense, but their defense, who knows where that is. Georgia is still Georgia, not going to be real explosive on offense, but a sound defense.
Yeah.
Florida, I don't know what happened to their defense.
Yeah.
Tennessee is just kind of improving on both sides incrementally. And Kentucky is still a force to be reckoned with. That they'll push you to the brink. So the litmus test is Georgia, Alabama this weekend. The top of the 2 divisions going at it. Somebody's going to come away with a loss. But
and I will say this too. What I don't want Saturday to become, regardless of the outcome, is an excuse situation to where, let's say Alabama loses, that Alabama can use this as an excuse to say, well, the only reason that we lost was because Saban wasn't there. It is in an East versus West kind of situation. So regardless of which team loses, it's possible with at least what the prognosticators and assumptions will be that Georgia and Alabama could be facing each other again this season in the SEC championship, if not a third time if they both make it to the playoffs, which would be an interesting situation. But I don't want Saturday to become a situation to where if Alabama goes down, that they're going to say, well, it's only because Saban wasn't there, and if he was there, we would have dominated kind of thing. We do have a stout offense, but a defense that has a lot of holes to fill in order to be competitive against Georgia on Saturday. But interesting week. I think that you had a great summation of all of those. I have gone back and rewatched and listened to people ad nauseum talk about that Bo Nix play where he picks up the ball and then throws it back down. And I haven't heard one person other than the officials on Saturday night. Not one other person has said that was anything other than a fumble. Now they have said that, because of the situation, the officials called it dead. And so that's played in Auburn's favor. But your take, your thoughts, do you think that was a fumble and should have sealed the deal for Arkansas winning that game? Or what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the SEC came out and said it was a fumble, but because it was blown dead,
right,
you can't go back and change it. I do think that refs are getting better at letting plays play out and blowing the whistle later. Because that allows them to go back and review it. Sure. If they had let that go and decided that it was indeed a forward pass, spiking the ball, whatever, then they can reset the game clock. They can kind of correct all their errors. They can't correct errors past the whistle.
Right.
Because players are just going to stop at the whistle.
Right.
And so you can't just reward that one player out of 22 who kept going. But, I'm thinking about Alabama, Georgia this week. I was watching more of Saturdays in the South, the ESPN Plus series about football in the Southeast specifically. And I think Alabama was playing maybe Georgia Tech, and it was coming down to the last play. Alabama had to score or they'd lose. And Bear Bryant is sitting on the bench. And one of the reporters, first things they asked him after the game was, Coach, you were on the bench when the game was on the line. What are you doing? And he said, I've prepared my team to be ready for every circumstance. It's their job to go out and do it. And
wow.
I feel like that could be attributed to Nick Saban. I think he feels the same way. We have prepared, and if you're not ready before kickoff, you're not going to be ready when the game's on the line in the fourth quarter. But
interesting.
But Chris, let's get into our picks for this week, because we got some good matchups going on.
We've got some great matchups, and just a shout out to our winner from last week, Josh B. Took everybody else down in our TSIO Pick'em League, and so congrats to him. And almost as impressive as his win was for last week, he also nailed the tiebreaker. The tiebreaker was between let's see. Sorry, just trying to get all my ducks in a row here. The tiebreaker was on South Carolina Vandy, and he guessed 48 points. They came down 48 points. So congrats for not only winning the week outright, but also nailing the tiebreaker.
Well, I know Josh has watched a lot of football, played a lot of football in his day. So congrats to him for last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's say for this week as well, this will be officially week 4 for the SEC, week 7 overall for college football. And as of right now, we have 5 games being played, but who knows what will happen in the next couple of hours. More games could be canceled, especially with things like Ole Miss, the news that they've got some COVID issues going on. Who knows that if the athletic director of Alabama and Nick Saban seem to be the only ones at this point that have tested positive for COVID at Alabama. So we think that that's going to happen. So all these games are tentative. I feel like that, in any other year would be able to talk solidly about what's going to happen just a few hours away from when the show goes live. But who knows? And this, anything goes, and who knows what will happen here, what week 4 in the SEC will look like. But first off, we've got at 11 a.m., we've got Kentucky and Tennessee.
Yeah,
on your boys.
Tennessee, a 5.5 point favorite. I think they rebound. They want to prove a point that they are superior to Kentucky, that they deserve to be up there with Georgia and Florida. The Georgia game became blown wide open there at the end.
Yeah.
But even with a couple of those turnovers, it could have been a 1-score game going into the fourth quarter, and we would have had a ball game on our hands. I don't know that Kentucky is in a place where they can compete with the Georgias at that level, and I think Tennessee with the points there.
No, I completely agree. I think that Tennessee is going to come out and show why they are feared from history, and why they're coming back with a lot of force. I think that they will take Kentucky pretty handedly. I could see that line moving several points more. I think that they could win by double digits. Yeah. I like what I see with Tennessee. They're 14th in the nation right now. Kentucky
18th. They dropped after the loss to
okay.
Yeah, this says 14th, but I think they're 17th and 18th in the 2 polls.
Gotcha. Okay. I still think that they are a team to be reckoned with, and so I think that they will cover that relatively easily. And again, what we like to do when we do the pick'em is let our audience know when and where they can view these games. But because of everything being up in the air, I know that just yesterday, 2 of the SEC games swapped. One that was going to be on the SEC network, swapped to ESPN, and vice versa for another game. And so these games right now are to be determined as far as where we can see many of them. But if it is mentioned live here, we will mention that. But next up, we've got another 11 a.m. game with Auburn going into South Carolina at Columbia, South Carolina, and playing. Auburn's the 3.5 point favorite. What do you think that game looks like?
I gotta go with Auburn because they're better than this. I, I think they need a win against the East, especially to prove to themselves more than anybody, hey, we're in the SEC West. We're prepared for this. We can handle it. So I'm going with Auburn to win by more than a field goal.
Yeah, I am as well. I mean, I know that it looks like I think South Carolina beat Vanderbilt last week by what was it, 34 points, something like that. I think it was 41-7 was the final. And so they showed they have some moxie against Vandy. But I think that Auburn needs to, and especially Bo Nix, needs to show why they're Auburn. And so I think that if South Carolina can't rattle Bo Nix, that Auburn wins handedly. So I'm picking Auburn in this one. But I do have a message for all of those defensive coordinators out there in the SEC. If you can figure out a way to rattle Bo Nix, you got a pretty good chance of making him a non-factor in the game. I like Bo Nix. I love his story. And this isn't an Auburn hater talking. This is just trying to take in the facts and see what goes on. But I've witnessed in the last season and this season as well, even though he was a preseason Heisman contender in several articles that I read, it looks like that if you can rattle him, you can take him out of the game, essentially. So if South Carolina can't do that, I think that they don't have much of a shot. And I think Auburn wins by at least this 3.5 point spread that it currently is at.
Yeah. Bo Nix not looking like a Heisman candidate so far this year.
No.
Next
Sometimes
up,
he doesn't even look like an Auburn starter, to
right?
be honest.
Well, some of the fans will say the same thing.
Yeah.
Then we've got Ole Miss versus Arkansas, currently slated for ESPN2 at 2:30 Central. Chris, how you leaning with Ole Miss and Arkansas?
I think that Ole Miss has such confidence that they built up, even with the loss. I think that I read an article over on ESPN that said, regardless of the way that the game actually played out against Bama last week, that the Lane Train Express and Ole Miss is firing. So I think that they are trying to build to prove that wasn't a fluke. Like now we're looking at Mississippi State a few weeks after their the air raid. Leach's air raid coming back and like, wow, he's really going to shake up the SEC and the SEC West specifically. But last week, they couldn't even score a point on offense, had only got 2 points total for that loss that they endured. So, but I think that Ole Miss is going to show that they are here and take it. It's only a 3.5 point spread. And so I think that they're going to take this. I really like what I'm seeing over in Arkansas, especially how they played against Auburn last week. But I don't know if it's enough to take down the Lane Train Express. But again, in this, who knows what will happen year, with the way that the West has been looking, Arkansas could blow out Ole Miss, and it'd be like, okay, I guess that's what happens in 2020. But I will say that just trying to look at it logically, which may be the wrong thing to do in a pandemic year like we're seeing. I'm going to stick with Ole Miss. What about you?
Yeah, nothing about college football is ever logical, especially during a pandemic.
Sure.
I'm also going with Ole Miss. I think Lane Kiffin's offense just said, "Hey, we're here to play with the big boys."
Yeah.
But Arkansas also did stop Mississippi State with only 1 week's game, 1 week's worth of game tape.
True. Yeah.
So we'll see what Arkansas has in store on their defense. Next up, just a few minutes later, kicking off at 3:00 Central on the SEC Network, Texas A&M goes to Mississippi State. A&M is the 6.5 point favorite. How do you feel about that, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, this is what I was saying a minute ago. I was ready to call Mike Leach just the savior of the SEC West when it comes to people trying to hire to beat Saban. But is it a fluke? Is he going to make good on what he said and trying to weed out those players that don't have buy-in? I don't know what to expect from them. I was excited to cheer them on all year. until I've seen that they kind of fallen apart. So I don't know what to expect from Mississippi State. Texas A&M coming off that big win last week. I think that they take this one and get the win and the points. So I'm picking Texas A&M here.
I agree with you. I think there's too much on tape of what stops the air raid offense. I mean, Mississippi State, they got 2 points last week. Those weren't 2 points that they scored. I mean, it's 2 points that the other offense scored. And, so Mississippi State is struggling right now. I don't think they can pull it together for A&M. I would love to be wrong. I agree. The Mississippi State Pirates, the Air Raid Pirates, make a statement coming back, but I don't think it happens this week.
You were talking earlier about the Alabama game against Ole Miss and like expressing that in an emoji. I feel like that the 2020 SEC football season, if expressed in an emoji, is just that person going like, huh? Yeah. I don't know. Kind of shrugging the shoulders.
Or the squiggly little face.
Exactly.
That's just confused. Yeah, it is.
One quick sec.
But it is, the 2020 season is absolutely bonkers.
Bonkers, absolutely.
And we'll get through it one way or another. The season may last 3 years, but hey, I don't mind 3 continuous years of college football. Just one game here, one game there. I don't know how it's going to work for eligibility. Halfway through or a third of the way through the season, you lose all your seniors and those go into the draft. It could be nuts, but
it's insane. Yeah.
That, on our pick'em, in our pick'em league, we still have Vanderbilt, Missouri in there. We'll skip it though. We'll go on to the CBS game that has been moved to 7 p.m.
Interesting. Again, who knows what will happen, and everything has happened. So now our CBS game of the week that usually kicks off 2:30.
Yeah. Which I think they may have done this for the LSU Alabama game a year or two ago as well. I don't know what CBS's contract is, but they can choose the teams they want, kind of last minute, schedule it whenever they want. But Agreed. It's Georgia and Alabama. Whew. Alabama, a 5.5 point favorite right now. I don't know that takes into account that Saban's got the Rona. But Chris, how are you feeling about your Crimson Tide?
Well, I think that I haven't seen this line move, and I think that it should. So the fact that currently it's sitting at 5.5, I feel like it's going to move closer to a pick'em, if not a little in Georgia's favor, because again, not having Saban on the sidelines. But where it currently is at 5.5, I'm just going to go off of that. And as much as I would like to use logic here and say that if Alabama can't straighten up their defensive issues, and Georgia's stout defense that they have, and an offense that's really starting to gel, I feel like that Alabama could lose this outright and look like quite the inferior team against a dominant Georgia. But because I'm an Alabama fan and I'm just crossing my fingers, I'm going to pick Alabama in this, but I really don't know why. I think it's just one of those emotional picks because I want Bama to do a good job. But just as a question before I ask you what your pick is, just another thought out here. If Saban's not on the sidelines and Kirby Smart's Georgia Bulldogs actually pulls out this win, do we then count that against Alabama or Saban versus one of his assistants in the he's never been beaten by one of his assistants situation, or is that an asterisk as well?
That's a good question, because I think this week, even if Saban's on the sideline, Saban loses to a former assistant. I think Georgia wins this outright. Watching their defense, watching that defensive line, that secondary is really good too. Now, Waddle is really fast, but Georgia's defensive backs can also throw him off his route. will Mac Jones have enough time in the pocket to read the defense once the play starts going? Will he have enough time to get it off? I mean, Tennessee's supposed to have a great offensive line. It did not look great against Georgia. And Jarrett Garantano's got less than 2 seconds to get rid of the ball. That's really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you got to get the ball out fast, but that's not a lot of time to get the ball, make your drop, and release it. So I'm picking Georgia to win outright against the Crimson Tide this weekend. But we'll see. And you can make your picks at home too. Just go to thirdsaturdaynoctober.com, sign up for our Pick'em League, and you'll get the instructions to join our league on CBS Sports, make your picks, and compete with Third Saturday in October Nation every week in our Pick'em League. So, Chris, we've made our picks. It's time to watch some football. It's time for some pregame.
Tailgate, man cave, living room, pregame, burgers, ribs, chicken wings, chip and dip, pregame, scotch and a lot of IPA, Coca-Cola, pregame, slaying darts, cornhole, pregame. How you gonna watch?
I'm excited about this week. I mean, as far as pregame goes, I am doing my best to reenact what I was trying to do the first week, which is me and my son watching football together. We try to do it a couple of times a year. He's 14 this year, and so his interests are not always let's hang out with dad like we've done in several other years. And so, but he and I talked about it. We're going to redo our wings. So we're going to do wings. We're going to do a couple of other snacks. I think a 7-layer dip for the rest of the folks here at the house. Last week, it just got crazy. I thought that I was just going to be kind of watching the game by myself. But I had a birthday party, and I had my son was elsewhere across town. And so that was a pretty wild Saturday, especially fighting over a group of girls, my daughter and her friends that were over, fighting over the big screen TV and what's going to be watched. Is it going to be football, or is it going to be vetoed by the Spend the Night party, and it's going to be some TV show? It's like a teenage soap opera on Netflix. So I got.
You were part of the virtual tailgate last week, and you were in the position that you are right now at the kitchen table, having to join the tailgate on your phone, watching it on your iPad, watching the game on your iPad. Well, hopefully,
let me say this. I got this big screen TV, this big wraparound couch, and usually it's ideal. I also have a nice TV in my bedroom, but my wife was in the bedroom watching a movie. My daughter was in our living room watching some shows as well. And so again, I basically bought a second mortgage worth of big screen TVs here at my house, but ended up having to watch the game here on this little iPad right here. So it is what it is, though. But this week I'm going to do some wings again. Going to watch it with the family, especially my son. I'm excited when he and I get to watch some games together. So that's going to be what I do this weekend. What about you?
Well, I can't wait to see you break out the sauce ponchos. We've been talking about those for weeks.
Yes.
It's up in the air. We may go to the lake with some friends and watch the games there, or
Cool.
I may be at home. But I will be on the virtual tailgate. So, like I mentioned earlier, Josh, who's attended all of our virtual tailgates, said, I love it because what I miss about football this year is hanging out with people, watching the game, and just being able to watch it with other people and just dialogue throughout the game is a highlight of his week. So be sure to go to thirdsaturdaynoctober.com, sign up for our virtual tailgate. You'll get the link to our Zoom hangout. And you don't have to stop by for long. Just stop by, say hey,
Give us a virtual high five.
Yeah, show us your sauce poncho, and go back to enjoying the game, or hang out all night with us. We'll be watching all the games, or I guess really just the Alabama Georgia game this week, because other games have been postponed. But join us for that game, and we'll be there all night. So, Chris, it's a wild week. Things may change between now and Saturday, but we have some college football. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Some college football is better than no college football. And we knew coming into this that if we were going to have a season, it was going to be wild and unlike anything that we've ever seen before. And it is playing out to be quite the season, especially in the SEC. And we haven't even gotten to Pac-12 ball yet. What's the other conference that hasn't even started playing yet? The
Big Ten.
The Big Ten hasn't started yet. I know that that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we've got a lot of football, but especially in the SEC, it's shaping up to be a wild season unlike any that we have ever seen and may never see again. So I am down for it, and I'm in for it. So let's go. Let's do this.
Yes, sir. Well, be sure to find us on social media at TSIO Pod. You can go vote for our quintuple T, the tailgate treats. Chris, tell us about that real quick.
All right. So this season, we've been doing every week. We have a Twitter poll where we talk about what our favorite snacks, what our favorite treats are from around when we watch college football or sports in general, tailgating or home gating or whatever that you're doing. And we call it the TSIO Top of the Tailgate Tournament of Treats. And this week is no exception. The last couple of weeks, we've done drinks, we've done dips. This week, we're going to chips. So we've got the battle of the salty and the flavorful. We've got two Doritos. We've got nacho cheese Doritos and Cool Ranch Doritos versus like the plain salty Lay's or the plain salty Ruffles. So what is your favorite chip to pull out during the big game and watch? We'd love to get your response over on Twitter. Go over there. It takes a second. You just put your guess in, and then you're added to the poll. But we're doing this all season long. We've loved having it so far. Last week, it looks like we had a 3-way tie going with everything except for sodas. So beer, liquor, and sports drinks all coming in a 3-way tie. So we'll keep it open for a little bit so you can continue. You can go back and vote for that as well if you need to. But especially find us over on Twitter at TSIO Pod and vote for your TSIO Top of the Tailgate Tournament of Treats Chips edition.
Well, go vote. Check us out on social media. Let us know your thoughts on your team's games last week and what you think is happening this week. And if you feel like it, you can always just give us a shout out like we do at the end of every show. Chris, I'm going to say it now. Roll balls.
Roll balls, baby.